I hope reasonably successfully, is summarise some of the key messages from today, some of the things that we may take away. I'm going to use the technology again to try and help a bit with that, and I will also invite the views of our panel and their reflections on the day. We are slightly ahead of time. I don't want to curtail any Q&A or discussion, but obviously, you know, as soon as we feel we are done on the questioning, then we will wrap up. I mean, what we have seen is a good broad range of presentations, obviously started by Andrew and his talk essentially about the code and doing the good things that are within in the code, about understanding what users need from the statistics that we produce, and then of course making those available in the most accessible ways possible. We've heard some feedback today about areas where we can improve in that, and in terms of timeliness and comparability too, and I'll come back on one or two of those points shortly. We've heard from a range of different users over how you are using the data. Really quite fascinating insights from my point of view, and I'm sure others in the room too, over you know, really the breadth and diversity in the use of the information and the number of different sources which are being used to support your analysis. So really, you know, a huge amount of use for a range of different things. Now, when we asked you to put your thoughts on post-it notes and to stick them up there, we took those away, and we've been putting them into word clouds. I mean, you've all seen word clouds before. Reminds me a bit of Halloween, the text on this, so maybe the timing of the event is coincidental, but these are some of the things that you have said, some of the sources that you say you use. So you've got business in there, which is kind of the business demography data, the BRES data, the GDP data, the ABS data, data on GBA. There are quite a lot of other detailed data sources being used as well, but you can see the big ones there. The bigger the word, the more commonly it was reported up on the boards there. So we can see that business demography is one of the biggest used, most regularly used data by the people in this room, and similarly BRES. In terms of what you do with it, policy development, comparison, presumably between sectors, between countries internationally, etc. Looking at changes over time, the regional dimension, we've heard a lot today about the need for information locally, regionally, and I think there's a challenge for us to see what more we can do in that area. The use of the data for evaluation purposes, further development of strategy, whether that be in setting up new businesses, developing existing businesses, etc., and doing more analysis with the information that already exists and is out there. So again, a wide range of uses in what is a relatively small group of people. The things that are missing, well, I mean, I will come back on some of this. Of course, these words don't tell the whole story. There's much more detail on the post-it notes. But I think the messages we need, ideally, more breakdown. We've mentioned geography, greater consistency, more accessibility in terms of you being able to access more of the microdata, and if not the record level microdata, but more aggregated microdata. And of course, you want all this now. That's a challenge for us. We will obviously look at all of the different priorities here, and we'll come back and vote on some of that in a minute. But there's a lot of useful feedback in what you said to us, so thank you very much for that. So we've had some insight into your uses of the data and options for the future. We talked a bit about globalisation, internationalism, if you like, innovation, not just innovation in terms of product innovation, but process innovation. We talked about high growth firms and mid-sized businesses, of course, as well. There is this trade-off to be made between the detail that we would all like and the timeliness of the information. Difficult challenge that, of course. We can do what we can within the processes that we have. We can look at the use of other data sources, admin data. We can look at the way in which we capture information from businesses, from some of you in this room, differently in the future, whether it continues to be via paper-based forms or some other method. We will be looking at a range of options, and indeed we are. This event for me has illustrated the importance of engagement in understanding, not just what central government needs are, but what that wider range of user needs are too. I mean, I don't know what your feedback forms are going to say yet, but the very fact that we had 20, 30 people wanting to come here today and speak tells me that there is a demand for a forum that allows people to get together and talk about uses, talk about future priorities, and maybe this is the first of a series of these sorts of events, not necessarily every month, not necessarily every 6 months, but the beginning of something and a regular dialogue. I think that's probably all I need to say. I think probably my favourite quote of the day was around the production of magic statistics. I wish they were magic and that we could answer all of your wishes and provide all of you for Christmas the things that you've asked for today. We do need to prioritise, so let's have a little look at what you think the highest priorities are. So you can pick up your voting pads one more time. We've got the issue of timeliness here. We've got the issue of comparability. Accessibility includes things like having more data on the VML, dealing with the disclosure issues so that you can see more of the information at a more detailed level, sectoral level, for example. Most of the rest speaks for itself. So please feel free.
Anyway, Jason,
you can't see, I'm sorry, let me read them through. Right, number 1 is timeliness. Number 2, comparability. Number 3 is accessibility. 4, fewer revisions. 5, accuracy. 6, coverage. And 7, detail. So we're talking about things like spatial detail, geographic detail, that sort of thing that we've been talking about during the course of the day. Is that okay? Okay, right, I'll open the voting now. Sorry, I've opened the voting. Can we go back and close the voting again? Let's reset the voting. We'll go back and do that again. Sorry, yes.
Apologies, there were at least 2 things I heard during the day that I don't think you covered in there.
Sure.
One was somebody, the GMA person, wanted to be able to get information for operational purposes. Now that may be completely out of course, but it seems odd not to include it, given this is quite a...
Yes, I think, I mean, you're right, there's a lot of detail that we could have added to this list, and unfortunately the voting pads only go up to whatever it is.
I'm sure. Are you saying there are lots of things that are missed out?
Well,
we agree that's accessibility.
I think that is covered in, I would agree, I think that is covered in accessibility. So please interpret these fairly broadly. We do have the detail. This is just a kind of finger in the air feedback from you over what the relative priorities are. We do have the detail, we will look at that. And of course, the plan beyond today is to publish a document for discussion, probably on Stats Usernet. I'll come back and mention a bit more about Stats Usernet shortly and encourage you all to sign up to that community. So let's open the voting, and as I've said, 1, timeliness, 2, comparability, 3, accessibility, including things such as access to that sort of data, 4, fewer revisions, 5, accuracy, 6, coverage, and 7, detail. You have 1 vote. You can try and vote twice, but it won't work, so just the first vote only. Yeah, there are a few spare pads lying around if anybody does want to vote for. Okay, polling is now closed, and the feedback is that accessibility is by far the biggest issue for people in this room. So clearly the detail's not exposed there. So accessibility, let me talk this through. I mean, it's the people peering as if to wonder what the order of the results are. So we've got accessibility with 17 votes. How many votes for poll? 45. More detail, 9, followed by comparability, and then we've got coverage with 5, timeliness and accuracy with 3 votes, and fewer revisions 1. So revisions of all the issues seems to be the one of least concern. I mean, admittedly, you were only asked to vote on 1 of those things. As I said, the detail does sit within the post-it notes that you provided to us, and we'll analyse that. Okay, I'm now going to ask the panel for their reflections on the day to add to the comments I've already made, and then we'll open the floor for a final Q&A. So perhaps I can start with Siobhan. Thoughts on the day?
Yeah, I think it was just really useful to hear the different perspectives of people who use this, what they're using it for, and sort of the issues that people have. I think there was an awful lot of common issues that came up, and my Christmas list and Margaret's Christmas list seem to be very similar in many places. it was also interesting this morning to hear Andrew Sentence sort of set out a new paradigm for what normal might look like. And that makes me think about whether we need to rethink what we collect and how we collect it moving forward. Are we capturing the right things for a dynamic economy and for an economy that's in a global position? So, yeah, just I think it's caused me to pause and think maybe we should be thinking a bit more outside the box, being a bit more innovative. The high growth and high technology papers are sparking ideas for me about if you were to look at official statistics on businesses, would you be classifying them in that end of it? It was just sort of an interesting lens to put on it. So I think lots of questions for us to go away and think about what we're measuring and how we're measuring it and how we can achieve all of these. I would like 7 votes, I think. So, no, I did my best with both of them. My thoughts in there.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thanks. I was actually very impressed by the technology. Just amazed. Anyway, the days left me feeling a mixture of actually being quite excited and also a bit frustrated about the future of business statistics, if you like. I mean, we in National Accounts, we're a user like lots of other users. I gave some thought as to what would be our 2 top stuff priorities for what we want from business statistics. I came up with we want consistency over time in particular, and a bit more detail on some aspects of business activity like purchases. But then I thought of other users, and actually different users want different things. I think that's the message, one of the messages I got from today. And if you develop a statistical system that's designed for just one of those uses, you come up with something that might be very different from what you've currently got. So what we've got is a bit of a compromise, actually, to meet everybody's needs. And given the resource constraints we're under, I don't actually think it does too bad a job. I'm excited because I think today we've demonstrated the great analysis that's been done by ONS and BIS and lots of other users as well. But I'm frustrated because everybody's so desperate for more to be done. So I think accessibility is the absolutely correct answer for what's important for the future.
Thanks very much. So it's been a very stimulating day with a terrific audience in terms of size and variety of interests. So there are 2 things that I'm particularly interested in that have come out today in relation to my day job. And that's understanding better the interaction between the real and the financial sectors. Andrew Sentence mentioned this at the end of his talk. And he also mentioned understanding the consequences of the regulatory and policy environment for likely developments in different parts of the real economy. Picking out 1 or 2 other themes, clearly there's a lot of interest in going from macro numbers to micro detail. And in some ways, as Graeme hints, sort of victim of one's own success, there's some interesting numbers that come out, and people want them more timely, they want more detail. They're raising questions, which is very good, but it's not possible to satisfy demand. Now, then I was thinking, well, if we think about surveys and traditional ways of collecting data, there are some important functions where that's probably the only thing you can do. I mean, surveys about expectations, inflation for us at the bank, consumer confidence, purchasing managers' indices, hopes and fears. Although I'm yet to be convinced about the great value of the content of well-being, it's obvious to me that you can only collect those sorts of data by doing surveys. But in other areas, I wonder if that approach is a bit outdated. And I'd be quite interested in a national debate about the contributions that can be made by the public sector, including greater use of administrative data, the private sector, including commercially available data, and probably the third sector as well, think tanks. I had a very interesting discussion with Chris Yu at Policy Exchange earlier this week. I hope many of you will know him. He's thought a lot about the practicalities of handling big data and some of the things that we traditionally worry about, like confidentiality. And I wonder there whether we worry a little bit too much about that. In all the businesses that I've ever dealt with, when you insist to them in the old days that honestly, Inland Revenue and Customs and Excise can't and don't share data other than under very specific circumstances, they always say, oh, come on, of course you do. I mean, everyone knows that you don't need data, Customs, everyone else, border agency. I think people don't really believe that those public sector data are as protected as much as they are. So why not have a debate about it, particularly in the nudge world, if we might move to a situation in which organ donation is opt-out rather than opt-in. Could we not easily move to a situation in which data sharing and more effective use of data was opt-out rather than opt-in as well?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I'd like to open the discussion now, please. Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to pose? Yes. Again, if you can say who you are, where you're from, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
My name is Michael Cleary, from nowhere in particular now because I'm retired. I used to work for BIS, and in my time there I worked on both industry and geographical statistics, so I kind of got both sides, view of both sides there. I think one dimension that has been missing a bit from the discussion today is what actual firms in business want of the fiscal system. It's very important what policymakers require and what economists require, and businesses can benefit, one hopes, from what those people develop in the way of analysis. But if I were a business, if I'm running a business, would I be looking more at what I need now in order to work out what to produce, what to sell? Nobody's mentioned PropGon, for example, the only source that I'm aware of on product data, apart from the trade statistics. So that's one comment I've got, that we haven't heard anything on that, and it shouldn't be forgotten. The other is that there's a very simple quick win possibly available in terms of increasing the quality of analysis that can be done, and that is if government departments try their best when they're running a survey to use the IDVR as the sampling frame rather than Yale or some other frame, because then the results can be linked to the IDVR and to other ONS data, and that opens up a whole range of rich analysis, potential for rich analysis.
Well, thank you for that useful feedback, and I would agree with what you said. I don't know if the panel would like to comment on that. I see it as a helpful comment. I don't think it needs an answer as such, but thank you. Are there other questions?
It's another point about confidentiality. One can quite see from a commercial point of view why the Statistics of Trade Act is necessary. And my very first job many years ago was working for ICI, and I was trying to keep the world away from our business data as much as I could. But we were concerned about the short term, and most of the statistics that are published are not remotely within the competitive frame of most businesses. And so there is no reason why, for a lot of users, even if the organisation still exists, and often it won't, there's no reason why data cannot be released after a handful of years. And in terms of improving the research that goes on, that would be an enormously useful thing. So can we, it's too late to get the Statistics of Trade Act changed, but can we think of some way of beginning to loosen the confidentiality as data becomes less and less damaging to people that supplied it, so that it's available to the wider community, and the businesses will benefit from that because they want to use the analysis to develop their strategies, as we were saying. I'm delighted to see there's a few nods around on that issue. I'd be interested to see if there's an official biz nod or a shake of the head on that.
Well, let's invite comments from the panel first of all then. Siobhan, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I think, we really do need to rethink about how we collect data and, whether the data how far it will get us. I know that the SDET project has been looking at using administrative data to substitute for surveys. And I do think that your point, but people that are missing from your list are actually talking to businesses about how we can engage with them. So that, I mean, the single thing that I think would improve business statistics tomorrow would be if every large company in the country, when they got their form, opened the envelope and filled it in immediately and sent it back immediately. And how do we get businesses to understand that when they see the GDP figures that it's based on the data that they supplied. So I think we start to look at a new paradigm where we're still using methods that we used 50 years ago, and the world has changed and the possibilities have changed. But I think we need to engage with the people who we're asking the information from as everybody else.
Thank you.
I've got a lot of sympathy from both speakers, questioners. But the code of practice doesn't let us, there's nothing in the code of practice that says you're allowed to disclose stuff that isn't damaging to people. It just says you're not allowed to disclose stuff. So it's a much, much broader issue than just business statistics. And, but anyway, I guess we'll take on board those comments and feedback.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with that. I think there are things that we can look to do. I mean, I don't think we're as quick to release into the VML, for example, some data that we might. I mean, there are things to do with accessibility that we can deal with now without dealing with the more complex issue of changing legislation, for example. But yeah, I think we need to start with the things that we can do now and look at those in due course. The other things, the more complex things, in due course.
Well, I just say that our statute applies the same strict standards of confidentiality, but it does allow us to release data with implicit consent, and we do seek that consent either from individual institutions or in relatively small groups. So we only have about 400 statistical reporters, banks and building societies based in the UK. And as you know well, the market's very concentrated, so the big six constitute about 80% of that market. But we did have an interesting experience over the last couple of years in seeking to publish an aggregate consistent profit and loss account for the banking industry in the UK, including a breakdown of income between interest fees and commissions, other components. And at first there was a lot of resistance to this. But it then turned out that the resistance was really coming because the banks don't have a common accounting day. So they were worried that the last two in the queue would stick out a bit if we published the aggregates, and you could deduct the rest and then derive something about their results if we published. But when we discovered this was what was underlying their anxieties, and we could actually reach an agreement to publish this within 12 months, all of them were happy, we were happy. There was just a failure of communication at the outset to understand what were the real commercial sensitivities. So I think it should be possible with goodwill on both sides to overcome some of these problems.
Yes, I mean, if I could just give an example, there are areas where we do go back and ask for consent to publish what is disclosed information, actually. For example, foreign direct investment. We do publish disclosed information with the explicit and informed consent of those companies. So, you know, it's more difficult currently to go back to every business or to indeed with every form seek that consent, but clearly it's something we could do more of in the future. A question from the back there, please.
More of a comment, really, with regard to the admin data and the release of data. I mean, you're absolutely right. Statistics and Registration Services Act specifically says that you can release the data with the explicit consent of the provider. However, HMRC does not have a provision like that in their act, and therefore they are not allowed to disclose data, even with the explicit consent of the provider of the data. And that's one of the stumbling blocks to using HMRC data. They have explicit, very tight legislation.
Agreed. I mean, and yet we know that there is very senior level will for more sharing to take place. So I think there does need to be a change, perhaps a legal change that will actually remove some of these barriers in the future. Other questions? We've got first of all at the front here, please. Thank you.
Kenny Rich from Scottish Enterprise. Just interested in the panel's views on what they think are the best examples of your analysis of business statistics for influencing policy.
Shall I go to Mark first, please?
No. No, I'm trying to think very quickly of the best. That's a real challenge.
It's a good question, isn't it? Well, can I put any of the other panel members on the spot for a best example? Or even a good example?
Or any example.
I'm being a bit dense. I think that in my domain, the very, very extensive analysis that was done in support of the Vickers Commission review of banking in the UK, and whether or not that served the interests of businesses well as customers. It's a very big report, a lot of detail. There, we had a rather interesting situation where one of our staff was seconded to the Treasury and promptly asked if he could use individual institutions' data for this purpose. We said no, as we always do. There are very good reasons why our legislation says we can't give data to the Treasury except for very particular purposes, simply because of the separation between the policy function and the operations. It's even stronger for HMRC, as is remarked upon. There's a long-standing tradition that the policy-making and legislation-making body should not be able to crawl over the numbers for individual reporters, because we might end up with the US style and people off. So that was a bit of an initial disappointment to them. But actually, we quickly found a way around that using data that were publicly accessible, supported by aggregates that were non-disclosive. And I think the result was very impressive. Whatever you think of the policy results, the published analysis is very high quality.
Thank you. Any other examples that our members would like to give? Quick passing of the mic there to Siobhan.
I probably don't have any good examples, but my team are the statisticians who are here who are vetted out of the policy teams may well do. Don't have any volunteers.
Was it any examples from the floor?
All shy.
Okay. Well, I'm sure there were many. Perhaps you could let us know. I mean, drop us some examples. I mean, actually, in all reality, it's very powerful for us to be able to illustrate the uses with examples of how people have been using this information for exactly that purpose. And policy was one of the key words on that word cloud that we showed in terms of uses. So, thank you. Now, there were some other questions over on the left-hand side there, please.
Jane McKinnon, Highlands Enterprise. We've seen today it's been very well illustrated in the presentation of the changing structure of the economy, the move from manufacturing economy to services. And the past few years have seen the emergence of new industries such as life sciences, renewable energy, development of respective supply chains as well. And yet, in terms of statistics, in terms of trying and measuring and defining these sectors, we're still using SICs and 07 are the latest, which only just really recently been implemented. Are there any plans to revise that? Obviously, the latest definitions are 5-year out of date, and it's really difficult in terms of trying to capture what's actually happening in the modern economy.
I'm not aware of plans for the next SIC. I don't know if anybody else in the room is. I mean, this highlights one of the difficulties, doesn't it, of maintaining comparability and consistency when there is change in the economy. And we've talked about IT and communications quite a lot today. And hand up at the back, and maybe Steve may be able to answer the question.
We're going to start looking at it in 2017, I think.
Right. Okay. I mean, of course, there are other things that you can do, or that can be done, in terms of identifying some of the major businesses that operate in that space, and in some way then tagging those and seeking to analyse change for that group of businesses. But of course that's quite involved, and it's not easy for people without access to the data, and we've talked about accessibility, haven't we? But there are things that of course can be done in a different way without using the SIC, but it's not straightforward. Any additional thoughts or comments on that? Graeme?
Yeah, we do some work with certain groups of people, like I think the creative industries, where we sort of artificially cross-cut the SIC. but it does require there being a bit of a consensus on the definitions of what feeds into a particular type of, because there isn't always a consensus. If you get that consensus, it's pretty easy to do some ad hoc analyses of the main variables to give people what they want. But it does require users to sort of come to some agreement of how things are defined.
Okay, thank you. Duncan first, and then we'll come back over to Bob.
Duncan Miller, Head of Profession at Department of Energy and Climate Change. I was led into that question, wasn't I? I totally support the issue. One of the, I raise it in terms of it's one of the issues we face within the GSS. If we can start producing data for investment in the renewable sector or job creation through energy efficiency or a whole range of policies that we're driving forward in depth, then all sorts of strange numbers are going to be used. Some of them might be broadly correct, others might have a margin of error as to why this is true. We've got no way of really controlling that. So we won't be able to move by 2017. 2017, if that fund's kicking off, it might be finished by 2023 or something like that. That's no good. So it's trying to work out how we got to the situation in the creative industry, and I know that's a great example, and how can we move from that. So we're not saying we've got every variable for all sorts of new technologies, but in some of the key ones, in terms of employment, in terms of investment, and in terms of some measure of output, whatever that might be, we've got something that we can say is, doesn't have to be a national statistic, but it can be an official statistic, it can be an official view. And, we're very happy to work with everybody on this, as most people on the panel know. But I just thought I'd really support the point.
Thank you. I mean, you're making that comment reminds me of a conversation we had only a couple of weeks ago, I think, as part of the Business and Energy Theme Group, where I think we were very close to this example in our discussions. Yeah, very, very close then. I think it just, again, goes to highlight the importance of working together on issues like this and having the discussion, thinking about practical solutions to the problem in the short term in advance of those more longer term ways of doing things. And, the Business and Energy Theme Group at the moment is largely producer-led. There are ways that we now have of engaging more regularly with the wider user. We've got Stats Usernet, which I've mentioned. Let me say it again. It's this Royal Statistical Society forum, which allows anybody, it's a user-driven forum really, to have discussions about official statistics and your needs. Let's give you the web address. It's stats, so STATS, usernet, all one word, .org.uk. And on there you'll find a community called, I think it's called Business and Trade now. Please register, and then through that we will be posting outputs from today, for example, and having that sort of dialogue. That's, I think, one of our primary ways of just keeping in discussion with people beyond forums such as this. So thank you for that point. Now there was another question, I lost track of where the hand went up. Just over here, it was Bob, that's right.
I suppose I'd just come back on the uses of business stats. I mean, clearly GDP is used quite a lot for policy, driving policy. He's gone now. Where's he gone? The guy from Scotland. Who else?
Catch a plane, I think. Yeah.
Things like exports. There's all sorts of policies that come out business stats, which one can enumerate. One of the things that I wanted to ask is when we have questions, issues, policy concerns about employment, we frequently refer to the LFS, and it's used enormously and extensively. Is it a reasonable ambition to think that we might get the firm level data into the same sort of position where when we have a question, we can, within hours, sort of run some tables to answer a question and understand a bit better what's going on in the economy or in a particular sector in that way. So, in terms of accessibility, I suppose, is the question. Can we get the data set? It'd still be in DML, probably, and accessibility point, but to get it to a state where it was sufficiently easy to access that people who had that access could run tables really quickly and use it in that sort of flexible fashion.
I think the answer to that has to be yes. I mean, I think that absolutely has to be. I hesitate to use the word vision because it sounds too far off. but I think it's something we must be better doing, and we are trying to make our data more accessible, even to ourselves in a sense, putting it into a form that we can cross-tabulate more quickly to be more responsive to those sorts of questions. And I think there's very much that we can do in that area. So I think the very simple answer to that question is yes. I very much welcome any other thoughts or views on that, but for me, I think it's a definite yes.
I think we already have examples of that, because we use the IDBR on a regular basis to be able to produce Steve Dempsey back there. To use it very much like you use the LFS to be able to do very quick Robson stuff. It's probably Brian as well is using various tools for doing that. But it is, yeah, it's within hours rather than within days.
Yeah. Any other questions? No. Okay, good. Well, thank you again for your time today. There's a number of things I'd like to say before we do finish. First of all, feedback forms. You were given, some of you, I think, a blue and a yellow questionnaire earlier on during the day. One of them is to do with the feedback on the statistical bulletins and the new design that was shown in the far corner of the room there. There was another demo on the web theme landing page, which again we would very much welcome feedback on. And of course there's the overall evaluation form for the event as a whole. It'd be really valuable feedback to hear what you thought about the individual sessions. I know there have been some issues with the venue and people being able to see from the back of the room, and I apologise for that. I hope you have been able to get a lot from the event in spite of that. Particularly it's something for us to think about in terms of the screen being visible to you, and of course the presenters and speakers too. But please comment on that and anything else that you may wish to comment on. Goes without saying that the little voting pads, please leave those behind. We need to return those to the Welsh Government, and thank you to the Welsh Government for loaning those to us. There's a box on the way out which you can put those in along with your feedback forms, or indeed leave them on your chairs. I need to say a few thank yous. I need to thank my panel. They've been there all day. They've not been able to see the screen themselves for most of it through looking through each other, but thank you for your insight and your contribution to the organisation of the event. To all of the presenters who put a lot of time and effort into putting their key messages and slides and so on together, and also to those people that submitted abstracts that weren't used on this occasion, but I think it's, as I said, generated for me a really good understanding about the demand for this sort of event. Of course, to the organisers, and you know, it's no exaggeration to say that a lot of people in my team and across the office and in Biz as well, who we organised this conference jointly with, have put a lot of effort into making today work. The technology that you see demonstrated here was a challenge for us to get it working, but it has worked. So thank you very, very much to all of you for your efforts and time that you've put into that. And of course to you for coming along and making this event such a great success. So thank you very much. Have a very safe journey home. I'm getting waved at me one more thing, which is these passes. Please leave the passes as well. Thanks again very much for your time. Thank you.